Welcome to the Writer's Room for Rodnet Radio. My name is Trina Wilcox, and my guest today, Jen Parker, your book, A Midlife Crisis.
That's
Welcome.
right. Thank you. It's so good to be here.
I love that title because you can feel it when you read it. It's like, oh, I think I can relate. So tell me about the story. What's it about?
Yeah, so the story is about three women in their late 30s, early 40s who are just kind of in a rut, right? Picture just the person in their sweatpants that we all became during the pandemic, sitting on the couch, eating pizza, drinking wine, rinse and repeat, right? Just not much motivation, kind of mustering their way through life. And then the lead character, Jane, her grandmother asked her to find a painting she created in college, which sends her on kind of a journey, if you will. But I tried very, very explicitly to make this not like a Reese Witherspoon and Wild type journey where the person can just take 6 months off of work and has thousands of dollars to travel the world. Instead, it's local. She's got to get off her butt in her own town and get to work and find something. And her motivating herself makes her two best friends do the same, and they all find their ways out of their rut. And the message of the book is kind of life can be good, but it's not a fairy tale, but it can be pretty good.
I love that. I feel like very many of us can so much relate. What what stirred that in you to write the story?
When I started writing the story, the truth was I was trying to move past a very difficult breakup. In writing the story, enough time passed that I had truly moved past the breakup. But writing the book was kind of my way of getting myself out of my own rut of just lack of motivation, like go out there and get it. And now I'm in a great relationship and a great place in life, and now I've got a book to say for it. So
Cool. Is
it
this
worked.
your first book? How many books have you written?
This is my first book. I had a
Oh, wow.
lot of writing experience before this, in sketch comedy and in joke writing. A lot of experience in that and a lot of stage experience, but this was my first long effort.
Really, I mean, we all think that we might be have moments that were funny in our head, but when you have to craft that and either put it in a story or write it down where you have a punchline, so the audience knows to laugh, that the joke is over, that's not easy. How is that a natural gift for you? How did you hone that craft?
It's definitely a craft I worked on for a very long time. I like to think I'm naturally funny as well, but that's where you start. I've been members of improvisational comedy theaters and sketch comedy theaters for about 20 years now, and I was part of a show for 5 to 6 years where we did a weekly sketch show, very much kind of mimicking the format of Saturday Night Live, where we're in Los Angeles, so we have the luxury of being able to get some celebrity guests. So we would have a guest host every week, and we would write a brand new show. So through that kind of repeated effort of again, I got really skilled at joke writing and the term that we use in at least comedy, which is being willing to kill your babies, right? Like
Yes.
you have jokes you love, they're not working, get rid of them, it's over.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
had that going in, knowing when I have my first draft, it is likely that I'll keep less than 1/3 of this, and that's exactly what happened.
Well, like you said, you've got to just keep going. If the show is good, you still got to do another one. If it's bad, you still got
Exactly.
to do it. So it teaches you that, persistence. Who are some of your guests?
Let's see. I'll try to think of people who are relevant to today. this, this is a few years ago. We had Rick Fox, the basketball player. We had a lot of soap stars, a lot of soap stars. I actually got to do an improvised soap opera with soap stars from like Days of Our Lives and from All My Children. That was pretty amazing. Jorge Garcia from Lost. We were all over the place. And we
That's
never
great.
got, like, of course, like the lead movie star, but we got some pretty great names and some really fun talent.
That's awesome. So you've decided to write. Are you going to be doing a series with this, or are you going to just do another book? What's from here?
So the way I've always approached writing and comedy in general is I really just go with what I'm interested in at the time, which
Okay.
people have all sorts of theories on how this should be done, right? Like,
Yes.
you write a book, you should automatically write your second one. I've never been able to work that way ever. If I'm in sketch mode, I'm going hard at sketch for a long time. For me, writing a book was absolutely torturous.
Really?
I found
Okay.
the process torturous. I'm so glad I did it. It was absolutely worth it. But it's a lot of kind of reaching inward and looking deep within myself that I'm happy to do, but I don't feel the need to do it again right now. So my answer is the next time I write a book will be the next time that something within me is like, you gotta do this,
Yeah.
and not before then.
Well, and talk about now this is fiction, and usually your jokes, of course, are fictitious for the most part. Have you thought about trying a different format, some, a memoir or even nonfiction sort, just to keep the writing skill going, but in a different capacity?
That's a really interesting question. I haven't really thought about that, but that actually does spark interest in me of a different way to go, because it's so different from what this was.
Yeah.
This is this the voice in my story is very much me. The things that happen in it are not.
Hmm.
But I do kind of like that idea of being a bit more raw on the page with actual life.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about that, how you did. I've heard so many different processes from writers. Some will carve out certain number of times in the hours in the day. Others are like, nope, I do an hour here and then I move on with life. How was the process for you? How was character development for you and that sort of storyline, storyboarding work for you?
Yeah, I started at first with, I tried to do an outline and I kept getting stopped up because I didn't have it clear enough in my mind of where I wanted to go. So then I went to what can best be described as vomiting on the page method. But for me, the only thing that ever worked in terms of keeping myself going and on track was, instead of timing, page count. Because I always felt like if I gave myself an hour, I can easily play computer solitaire for 45 minutes of that, write for 15 minutes and call it a day. But if I say I have to write X number of pages today and I'm not done until I do that, that I could always accomplish. And it allowed me to kind of get the emotional stuff out that I really didn't want to have in the story, and then kind of put it aside and then focus on the real storyline. In terms of character development, that wasn't as difficult for me in getting who I wanted on the page, simply because that I did have a lot of experience in, but getting a long story out, I really didn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Now publishing, how did you decide how to publish? How did you publish? What were your pros and cons like?
Well, I had had success in the past of getting agents for, like, commercial agents, things like that with respect to acting. Trying to get a book agent for my first novel went exactly how I thought it would go, which is that I sent out many, many query letters. I got one bite and it ended up being a rejection. And
Oh,
I'm no newbie to rejection, being in Los Angeles and being at least tangentially related to the industry. That's okay. But after a long period of time, I realized this isn't working. I have to do this myself. So then I did. So that's not
good.
necessarily advice. I think if anyone can get an agent, it's a great way to go. But I've heard from a lot of people that are writing fiction that it can be quite difficult to do at first.
Yeah, and I just the more I keep learning from other writers and just about publishing in general, that it's almost a badge of honor these days to publish it yourself. And I love that because, and I'm not saying either way is bad. If someone offered me a book deal today, I'd probably be like, yes, where do I sign?
Of course.
But at the same time, you do have a lot of control over what you're doing. And if you've got a story, tell it. Who is to say who does or does not want to hear that story? You know?
I feel the same way. I really
Yeah.
do. I do say it in hindsight because, like you said, if someone offered me a book deal, I would have taken it in a heartbeat.
Right.
But one thing I like about how this ended up going is I didn't have any opinions on the content of my book that I had to take that I didn't want to take.
Yeah. Yes. I
So
like
there's a
that
win
very
there.
much. Yes, for sure. For sure. What kind of writing advice would you give for someone that is nervous about starting or just not sure how to even begin? Or like what you did, a lot of people, watch Saturday Night Live or sketch comedies all the time and think, how do I even start? Because a lot of us are not born in LA, like that is not, we're not at in arm's reach to get to those people that we think, not necessarily have to think that give us that hand up.
That's a great question. I'm going to start with the comedy part because I know the answer to that one.
Right.
So, so in order to get started in sketch comedy, the best thing to do is take classes. Though you are right, they're not offered everywhere. They're offered in a lot more places than you would think. And now, sorry, you probably hear my excited dogs barking in the
I
background. Evidently, there's been a squirrel
understand.
invasion.
Mine might make a cameo here in a moment. No problem.
But I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of these big comedy schools weren't still offering online classes for people who wanted to take them. So you
Yes,
can
okay.
learn sketch comedy that way. You can get your own comedic voice on your own, but to learn the skills of what are the higher percentage choices of what's going to hit, I would recommend the classes,
Okay.
whether you're local to them or not. In terms of writing process for people starting out, the biggest tip I could give, regardless of format of writing, well, actually, no, let me take that back. This might not apply to sketch, but for books, this is absolutely true. Don't worry about, if you're going for comedy, do not worry about the jokes. Get to that in draft 3. Get out what you want to say and make sure, for me, the most important thing was that the tone I was hitting was the one I wanted to hit. And I didn't want to share it with anyone until I knew this is at least the vibe I'm trying to give. Happy to take notes on content, on direction, but for me, the voice was the most important. So for anyone going for anything in the comedic area, I would say go for tone first, then get opinions on storyline if you're up for them, and jokes come last.
Okay. So how did you know that when you said you were trying to get that tone, did you stop down, take a break, come back and read through it like with a fresh pair of eyes and get out of your head for a while? Or did you just kind of drill through it constantly?
I stopped so many times to
Okay.
take a breath so I could come
Yes.
back. At one point, I stopped for almost a year because I was like, I cannot look at this anymore. I can't see it anymore. I'm too
Yeah.
inside of it. I'm like, I have to step away. But once I did that, I could come back and look. I was like, yeah, that's the voice I want. There's definitely stuff to clean up, but I have hit the tone I want to hit. So it was
How long
definitely the stepping away that helped.
how long did it take start to finish?
5 years.
5 years,
It,
really
it could
good.
have gone
Okay,
a
cool.
lot faster. It could have gone a lot faster. I didn't want to.
No, that's honest. I love that. I mean, I feel like people think, and I'm one of them, I'm like, oh, I started that project years ago. That's dead and done for. But no,
No. If
give
it
it
keeps
life.
calling to you, go back, call it back.
Another question for a lot of people that want to start writing, but they can't quit their full-time daytime job all the time. How did you was this a full-time project for you, or did you have side hustles as well?
I've always had full-time work while pursuing anything
Okay.
in comedy, and this book was a huge side project for me. It took up a lot. I shouldn't say it took up. I gave it a lot of my time on weekends, and I gave it a lot of my evening time.
Okay.
But one thing I liked about that is it's a very different feel from my day job. So it did still feel kind of like a break, even though it was work,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
No, it does. It really does. I think that's very encouraging for people to realize too. I want to make it less taboo for people to think that their dreams have to be at the forefront all the time. And those are the dreams don't always have to pay the bills. That sometimes you do what you need to do full time, and if you love it, great. You're blessed beyond measure. But if it's what you do, just what you do, but then the passion may be very part-time, that's okay.
You know
And I
what's
want,
funny about that is that I
yeah.
believe in that so much that that's one of the main messages in the book, actually,
Oh,
right? Her whole side hustle is kind of getting out of her own way, but she still has to go to work every day, do that,
yes,
then can work
yes,
on her own character development. Because you're right, so many of us don't have the luxury of, cool, I'll just stop working.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
not a thing.
that sounds great, I'll just go do this. No. I love it. I've loved this conversation. I hope you'll come back with whatever next project you decide
Thank you
to
so much. I would love to.
bless us with. I think it'd be great. I'm on Amazon right now. This is probably going in my car. I have a hard time picking good fiction books, and this definitely sounds like a great fiction book. So thank you
Awesome.
for
Thank you
sharing.
so much. Thanks so much, Trina.
And tell people again where they can go on Amazon and what they need to look for.
Yeah, go on Amazon.com, search a meh life crisis. That's MEH dash life crisis. And just so I can give you a bit of a visual, the picture on the front is a drawing of a woman on a couch while the couch is on fire and she's just casually sipping wine and reading a book, which is kind of the whole feel.
So if you think it's the last picture in your phone, it is not. Is the cover of a Meh Life Crisis.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Jen Parker. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.